Tonight, Action News Jax investigates the use of force by JSO. We spent the last 9 months digging for answers.
That's after a schizophrenic inmate with no prior arrest record died, hours after he was taken into custody. Reports show Jacksonville corrections officers tasered father of 2 Paul Testa and strapped him into a restraint chair. That's when he stopped breathing. His son talked exclusively to our Jenna Bourne today. She dug through thousands of pages of documents that cost our station thousands of dollars. She found those restraint chairs are being used in half of all cases where a corrections officer uses force on an inmate.
This is 19-year-old Christian Testa.
And it was just, I'll see you tomorrow. And I didn't.
The next day, his father would be gone. Paul Testa was arrested when neighbors say he jumped their fence into their yard with their dogs, armed with this sharpened wooden spear. Why?
Psycho. We don't even know him.
Hours after Paul Testa's arrest, a judge who dropped the charges decided he needed help, not jail. But this Jacksonville father never got that help. These JSO death investigation documents say Paul Testa started fighting with corrections officers after that court appearance, even trying to grab one officer's taser. Corrections officers tasered Testa, then strapped him into this restraint chair. In the report, one officer told investigators he saw Paul Testa struggling and breathing heavily. After Testa was strapped in, officers say he stopped breathing. Christian Testa says when he got to the hospital, his father was brain dead, but was still shackled to the bed with armed JSO officers on either side.
My dad was in the bed, choked out so bad that his eyes were popping out of his head. I knew right there that he was gone.
After months of emails with JSO about what the agency would and would not release, I submitted a public records request for every report of force within the jail that involved a restraint chair in 2014 and 15. 6 months and nearly $2,000 later, this is what I got. 2,079 pages, 267 reports. They reveal that out of all the instances when a JSO corrections officer used force on an inmate, half involved inmates being strapped into a restraint chair. 14% of those inmates were tasered first.
I just don't understand why they would need to use something like that on top of a taser. You're getting electrocuted, then you're getting tied down. This is something that was cruel and unusual.
The medical examiner lists Paul Testa's cause of death as excited delirium syndrome. It's a diagnosis not recognized by the American Medical Association or the American Psychological Association, and you won't find it in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Who does recognize it? Medical examiners and law enforcement. In fact, it's a question printed on every JSO inmate use of force report.
He just swept under the rug. I wouldn't even have gotten any information from JSO if I would have gotten a lawyer.
Testa's son has filed this wrongful death lawsuit against JSO. In the meantime, the jail has added 2 restraint chairs since Testa died, bringing its total to 13. JSO declined my numerous requests for an interview about their use of the restraint chair. I took it a step further and compiled information from other law enforcement agencies about their uses of the restraint chair, and I made a surprising find. I'm working on that side of the story for you now. I'll have that all new for you at 6. Reporting live downtown, Jenna Bourne, CBS 47, Action News Jax.
Neither the state attorney's office nor the Florida Department of Law Enforcement investigated Testa's death.
An Action News Jax investigation finds the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office uses a controversial restraint chair 3 times more often than a larger Florida agency.
At 5, our Jenna Bourne revealed JSO uses restraint chairs in half of all cases where a corrections officer uses force on an inmate. She joins us live now outside the jail. And Jenna, you started asking questions last year after an inmate stopped breathing in one of those chairs.
Paul Testa was tasered and put into a restraint chair here inside this jail back in December. In an exclusive interview today, his son tells me his father didn't have to die. Those chairs are designed to get unruly inmates back under control, but there's a lot of controversy surrounding their use.
I didn't, expect anything to happen, honestly. I went by there the next day and the house was empty.
19-year-old Christian Testa didn't know it at the time, but his father, who'd never been arrested before, was in jail on trespassing and criminal mischief charges and would be brain dead that night. These JSO death investigation documents say Testa, who had schizophrenia, fought with corrections officers. The documents say Testa was tasered and strapped into this restraint chair where he stopped breathing. I've learned that the Florida Department of Corrections doesn't use restraint chairs in state prisons. Neither does the Federal Bureau of Prisons. 6 months ago, I filed a public records request for every report of force within the jail that involved a restraint chair in 2014 and 15. JSO charged us a $2,000 fee, but I got the documents. In 2 years, there were 267 reports. Compare that to the Orange County jail system, which houses more than twice as many inmates. In those 2 years, Orange County corrections officers used restraint chairs 87 times. That means JSO used the chair more than 3 times as often.
The restraint chair can be classified, in my opinion, as timeout on steroids.
Action News Jax crime and safety expert Ken Jefferson started his decades-long JSO career as a corrections officer in 1986. Now Jacksonville's jail has 13.
What comes to mind is 2 things. One, are these inmates coming in and acting out more frequently than others? Or 2, is the tolerance level so low that JSO is just not going to put up with it? They're going to put them in a restraint chair, let them sit there.
These documents show corrections officers regularly face violent situations. Inmates threaten, claw, and even throw bodily fluids at them.
If you have that particular item available and you've got an uncooperative, violent person, I say why not use it?
Paul Testa's son filed this lawsuit against JSO. He believes his father didn't have to die.
Feels like something was just like ripped away. I didn't get to say goodbye.
JSO declined my numerous requests for an interview today about their use of the restraint chairs and the results of my investigation. But minutes before airtime, they sent me a statement which reads in part, "We can't armchair quarterback what another facility or corrections operation does. The use of the restraint chair in appropriate cases is intended to and does prevent injuries to both officers and inmates." Reporting live downtown, Jenna Bourne, CBS 47 Fox 30. Action News Jax.
And JSO also sent us its policy on using restraints today. It says inmates in a restraint chair must be checked on every 15 minutes. The chairs must not be used as a form of punishment.
Tonight, Action News Jax investigates the cost of public information. By Florida law, anyone has the right to get access to documents and records from our local government and even law enforcement. But at what cost? Action News Jax, Jenna Bourne joins us live in the newsroom. And Jenna, you started looking into this after we paid almost $2,000 for a single public records request.
I made that request to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Not only did the documents cost almost $2,000, they took 6 months to get. When I asked other Florida agencies for the same information, I got a very different response.
I believe that this request costs $2,000.
Our crime and safety expert and former JSO officer Ken Jefferson was stunned. We broke down the $1,851 JSO charged us for this. 2,079 pages on JSO's use of restraint chairs in the Duval County Jail. JSO charged 15 cents a page, the maximum allowed by state law, and as I found, standard among law enforcement agencies in our area and around the state. Here's the big difference. JSO said it took 9 hours to pull and print the documents, charging us $47.89 an hour. On top of that, 16 hours for reviewing and redacting at $69.27 an hour. I checked with Putnam, Seminole, St. Johns, Clay, and Columbia counties and found the total cost to pull, print, and redact averages between $11.50 an hour and $15.99 an hour. I found JSO's hourly rate isn't the same for all requests. Just this week, Action News Jax paid $17.50 an hour to pull, print, and redact several public records requests. So why the difference? Public Information Officer Melissa Bujeda tells me JSO's $17.50 an hour personnel clerk doesn't have access to restraint chair documents or training to redact them. Florida law says agencies must charge based on actual labor costs for the personnel required to complete the records request. As for the 6 months to get the documents, I made the same request last week to the Orange and Seminole County Sheriff's offices in the Orlando area. Both said it would take about a week and may be free of charge. I also requested surveillance video of the inmate who sparked my investigation, Paul Testa, from the time he arrived at the jail to when he was taken to the hospital. Testa had stopped breathing while strapped in a restraint chair. JSO told me surveillance video inside the jail is not public record. You may remember the agency did release this jail surveillance video from inside JSO's intake back in April when they fired this officer who's seen here hitting a female inmate. Reporting live in the newsroom, Jenna Bourne, CBS 47, Fox 30, Action News Jax.
This is Action News Jax Sunday.
Put your hands behind your back.
This man is in the throes of excited delirium syndrome, a mysterious diagnosis many in the medical community don't even recognize, but police do. In fact, law enforcement and medical examiners in Jacksonville have used it to explain the deaths of several people in police custody. In this Action News Jax investigation, our Jenna Bourne shows us why some call it a cover-up for police brutality.
Yeah, that's fine.
This video is shown to every Florida law enforcement officer during their training on excited delirium syndrome.
Remember, your mom's all worried about you. Try to relax so we can help. Mom! That ain't gonna... Don't let him kill me!
The Florida Department of Law Enforcement Training Manual says the signs include unbelievable strength, imperviousness to pain, and bizarre behavior.
Mom, grab a shovel.
You got it?
Yep.
It's the same syndrome listed as the cause of death for Jacksonville father Paul Testa. The schizophrenic inmate whose charges had just been dropped became unresponsive after being tasered and strapped into a restraint chair at the Duval County Jail.
My dad was in the bed, choked out so bad that his eyes were popping out of his head. I mean, I knew right there that he was gone.
His family took him off life support and is now suing the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Testa is one of 8 people in Northeast Florida in the past 5 years to have excited delirium listed as a cause of death or contributing factor.
It's oftentimes used for incidents where somebody dies and they can't pinpoint the exact nature of the cause of death.
Justin Mazzola is a researcher for Amnesty International, one of several human rights organizations questioning whether excited delirium is a cover-up for police brutality.
So it's basically a catch-all, and it basically excludes other uses of force.
If you look at this section here.
We traveled to the University of Miami to talk to neurology professor Dr. Deborah Mash, the leading expert on excited delirium syndrome.
When is it excited delirium and when is it homicide? And that's the issue.
It's a condition only recognized by medical examiners, emergency room physicians, and law enforcement. Why doesn't the American Medical Association recognize it? Why doesn't the American Psychological Association recognize it?
When is it recognized? Why are we talking today? It's recognized when a person is dead. Many doctors have never even seen an individual in this condition. They don't just go to the doctor and say, I think I'm in a state of excited delirium and I need some meds. No.
According to Amnesty International's data, 23% of excited delirium deaths after police tasering have happened in Florida, more than any other state. Taser International acknowledged in this email to me, excited delirium is the second leading cause of taser-related deaths. FDLE's lesson outline shows Florida officers are trained that the safest way to handle someone showing signs of excited delirium is to taser and restrain. Could restraining someone who's experiencing excited delirium contribute to their death?
We do not know precisely whether or not restraint will be additive to the stress that the individual is already experiencing.
I asked JSO Director of Investigations and Homeland Security, Ron Lendvay, whether it's appropriate to train officers to restrain if we don't know whether it makes people with excited delirium more likely to die.
You're back.
We do know that restraining individuals leads to the de-escalation of conflict. So, absent scientific evidence to the contrary, I think it's our best move at this point in time.
This is a medical emergency, and if you can't get the patient under control, how do you get them medical assistance?
While researchers continue to study how to keep people from dying of excited delirium, officers continue their policy of taser and restrain. And families like Christian Testa are left with more questions than answers. Reporting, Jenna Bourne, CBS 47, Action News Jax.
Last month, Jenna's investigation revealed over a 2-year period, JSO used a controversial restraint chair in half of all cases where a corrections officer used force on an inmate. Out of 267 reports, 6 of those people were noted as exhibiting symptoms of excited delirium.